Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie. I am excited for tonight's show. We are going to be diving into paying attention to your experience because our experience has a lot to teach us and tell us, perhaps even far more than credentials or any kind of, honestly, list, accolades, recognition ever could. Experience truly is the hallmark of what qualifies us in so many ways because the experience is the activation of every single part of us in the learning of whatever we're pursuing. It's the mind and body and the emotions associated with it. So, experience is actually a holistic approach to whatever may be our pursuit of education. But then, when you actually go and put it into practice, once it becomes a real lived moment in time, it moves from the head to the entire being. And now all of you is engaged in this thing called life. And so tonight, I want to talk about what if your experience actually was the thing that qualified you? Because for so long, our education system was actually positioned in such a way, and society as a result was positioned in such a way to respond according to degrees to education rather than experience. And over the last 10, 15 years, there's been a dovetailing into, well, you can get a certification by way of, the experience that you garner during that certification and then the subsequent work thereafter. That was beginning to be permissible. And now, ever more than ever before, are we seeing people moving away from traditional education, and people are more curious and open to even accepting different types of matched experience that would substitute or even almost like equate to what the education would have been in the experience that they would receive. And so it's really interesting and very fascinating watching the world evolve as a result of an increased appreciation for experience over just education. And I think in this process, we've also seen an evolution over value of not just IQ, but also EQ. Suddenly, both hemispheres of your brain being engaged has become a value. So now it's not just employers looking to hire employees who have the smarts and the brains, but they're also looking at who the person is. Do they match company culture? Do they know where we're going? Do they adhere to our values? There's a lot more around alignment. There's a lot more around both education and experience where we're seeing a lot more value coming in with both parts of our brain being activated in the workplace. And so before I continue, I just want to say a quick good evening to Brian. I'm so glad to see you here. This conversation, Oscar, good to see you. This conversation around experience versus education, and it's an and, it's not one or the other, but really looking at our life through the lens of what is the experience that I've encountered, how can my experience actually teach me about me and serve as potentially an identification of, look at the through lines that have been throughout my entire life, and let me actually consider how they might play a part in the future. When we're thinking about this, it was kind of fun. So tonight I was working on my resume. I haven't touched a resume since 2020 because I started my business in 2019. And for whatever reason, I was editing my resume in 2020. And so I haven't touched it. I haven't added anything up. I've created about sections or overview sections around the Knowing Agency in briefs or proposals, pitches, things like that. But to actually put it in a resume format and actually outline, I was looking at 15 years of my life in some ways. And it was all of a sudden, I just was looking at the pieces of experience that have served as that through line and various through lines from 2011 through where I am today. What has been consistent? What are those themes? What have I been drawn to? What has lit me up? What am I most proud of looking back over the last 15 years of my life? And there's something around looking at our experience that reduces life into and almost like reduces it down to paper, where it's like, okay, what are the highlights that I'm pulling forth? And I even included at the very end, just some additional elements around me, hosting a podcast and doing some acting stuff and writing a book. Like, I included more about me, but it was interesting there too. I've got a lot of professional highlights. What about my personal highlights? What would you put if you were to put the resume of your life on paper? What would be there for you? What would be most exciting? And how can we actually allow for experience to serve as a mirror for us, to look back and see the highlights of our life? When were we most alive? This morning in A Course in Miracles, we were talking about the fact that all thoughts, there are no neutral thoughts. That was a lesson for today. And how every single thought is either life-giving or life depleting. It either gives energy or it takes away energy. And so at various points throughout the day, I have my alarm set, because every morning we're going through this ideally at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. And I've hit that time for probably 70% of the time. But we've been going live consistently every single morning since January 1st, going through A Course in Miracles, and every day it has a little lesson. And today's lesson was about the fact that no thought is neutral. No experience is neutral. Every single experience we've ever had adds to or detracts from who we are, what we do. And in one sense, you could look at it from the side of the alchemist of every experience we've learned from, and therefore it's an addition. And also, we can think about it from the point of, those experiences were actually very painful for me. And so as I look forward, yes, I can derive meaning from it, but I'm not going to go and intentionally pursue it once more. So when we think about experience, our life in terms of a resume, what are those highlights? What are those moments of addition and life-giving that really formed you into who you are? And then what are the detractions, the deterrents? And then this is an additional layer. And this is just a fun concept that I'm kind of playing with right now, because I was working my resume tonight for the first time. Who are the people that are life-giving, life-adding, versus the people who are detracting and almost like reducing the energy and lifeline that we have? So it's looking at the experiences to learn from them and derive meaning from the allegories of our life. Like we were talking about, full circle moment from conversations at the beginning of this week, looking at the allegories of our life and intentionally doing so to pull forth meaning. But this experience aspect, this experience analyzation is so fun because there's so much meaning to pull from here. And not just meaning. It's like as I was looking at this, I was like, oh my gosh, back in, I guess, 2011, I was working with kids. When I was 12 years old, I opened a camp for kids, and I worked with kids 7 summers straight. And then when I was, I guess 21, I started working with a trades business. And then I started getting involved with my dad's painting company when I was like 25. And then I joined the family as a partner in the trades business. And then I served as CMO for another trades business. And so there's like these through lines. Kids is actually definitely one of them. I just really, really have a heart for kids. So I'm curious, the past, if we identify the through lines where we found meaning and life, so then how can we actually potentially even project and curate with intention future through lines? So if this point in my life was super meaningful to me, where I found, and when I say meaning, it's like a part of my soul is on fire. There's nothing as beautiful as the human soul on fire. So those moments in the past, how do I actually intentionally recreate them? I was listening to the book From Good to Great this morning by Jim Collins, and I've read it before, but frankly, it's just been on my mind. And I realize now why, because my goal for this year is discipline and being predictable. And he's like, the 3 pillars of this book are the disciplined mind, the disciplined person, the disciplined behaviors. And I was like, or actions. And I was like, all right, I'm clearly in the right place. One of his points that he makes later on in the book, I haven't gotten to this point in round 2 of listening to it. One of the points he makes, he says, why do you stop doing what got you to the good part to begin with? A lot of companies, when they're on this pathway to growth, they stop doing what worked. Y'all, we stopped doing that too. The things we loved as kids, the people we love. And even today, I was talking to my partner on the phone and I was like, so why are you pursuing making all this money? Like, we forget why. And how can we actually bring the resurgence of life and enjoyment today while we're working towards different goals? Sure, but how do we actually live in the fullness of the now? Because we don't know what tomorrow will bring. You know, especially for those of us who have experienced losing someone, whether it's at a young age or even an older age, it all serves as a mirror for us to remember what we have is today. And so if we're constantly living for the future, we're going to miss out on the moments that effectively become the past that we then will look back on and say, "Oh, those were the glory days." Yet we didn't actually live them because we're thinking about the future. So these moments, this is the past right now in one sense. You know, we're creating our legacy today, right here, right now. And so if we're not looking back with intention to then craft our future trajectory with purpose, then the present moment, which we enter into every day through the future that we're effectively building, we're not actually going to be able to be truly in alignment for what is life-giving to us. What's life-giving to you is going to be so different than what's life-giving to me. Maybe there's overlap, but being brave enough to, maybe it's not even, maybe part of it is like being brave enough to not look like everybody else. Because perhaps what truly is satisfying to your soul isn't what is for everybody else. And so are we brave enough to do this journey alone for that time being, and maybe go find people that do really love what we do and whose hearts are set on fire for the same things. But we have to learn from experience first. Look at the through lines. Look at the points that were life-giving and life-depleting. And if you want to take it an extra layer deeper, who are the people alongside with you in those moments? And then use that as a compass to chart forward and chart moving forward with the path. You know, it's kind of like a navigational system, using our values, our mission, yes, but also our experiences to create a new navigational system that may actually take us in a completely different direction, yet they've been there all along, like those threads, those whispers. It's almost like paying attention to my sister actually is doing music history, or I'm sorry, music theory right now. And she was listening to a piece and played it for my mom and I. And it was so interesting because all of a sudden I started noticing like the melody was playing, but then there was this other line. It wasn't really the harmony. I don't actually know what it's called, but it's almost like the left hand of the piano. And I started paying attention to that. And there was a simplicity to it and a beauty. But so often we only listen to the melody because it's louder and it takes more control and more resonance. So it's like, what are those other through lines in our life that maybe were more subtle, more quiet, yet so stabilizing, so life-giving, and where we derived so much joy? So, Ken, I just saw your chat. Yes, I would love to. I would love to chat with you. I would love to hear kind of what's on your mind tonight. James, thank you for start. Oh, I love this. I was about to say, James, thank you for joining, but then I just saw your comment. Can't start a fire without a spark. Isn't that so interesting? Looking in the past and actually examining those experiences could very well be the spark that we need to reignite the fire that perhaps we lost. So I appreciate that's a really, really good comment there. Hoa, thank you for joining. Christopher, Leonardo, good to see you. Ken, I'm just waiting. Maybe you jumped off, but anyways, y'all, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know it's late. I got to go to bed. I was up late working on my resume, and then I joined late tonight. So I'm sorry for not keeping my 8:30 p.m. So I will see you, though, tomorrow morning. I'm setting my alarm for 8:30 a.m. for A Course in Miracles. Y'all, I don't know about you, but this morning's A Course in Miracles lesson was so good. I have no neutral thoughts. Nothing is neutral. It's either a positive impact and a positive influence, or something that is actually going to literally suck the life out of us. So, Christopher, I just saw you say I'm here. Yay. what's interesting about you? I just saw your comment, ND01. What's interesting about me? Well, what's interesting to me about me, I love getting to know people and being real, like, I love knowing what makes them them and just really knowing who they are. Um, I love I love asking questions. I find interest in what is almost like the chemical, emotional, intellectual balance of what makes you you, the stories and the experiences. And I just love life. I think that that's something that's interesting. I don't find many people who really genuinely love life. But part of it is just being so in the present and choosing how do I want, like, what kind of a life do I want to live? I actually want to be happy. And we get to choose to be that way. And I've had these moments multiple times where I'm feeling exhausted and I'm like, you know what? I actually don't want to feel exhausted right now. So I'm gonna place my attention somewhere else and my energy will follow that. So instead of fixating on what makes me feel so tired or what makes me feel sad or angry, I'm going to actually move my attention elsewhere. And then the energy literally follows that. Um, Nicholas, I just saw your chat. I actually need to get my glasses tightened because they keep sliding down my nose and then I keep having to move them up. Um, Lendl, it's so good to see you. I didn't know you were in California. Um, I love California. Where in California are you? Y'all, let's just chat for a little bit. I'm glad y'all, I actually have not been paying as close attention to the chat over the last couple of days because um, it was sad. There's been some very mean things that are being said. And so I've had to just grow more tough skin than ever before. But honestly, it's been such a good experience. If we find meaning or worth in other people's opinion of us, that just immediately makes it such a dangerous world for us to live in. When I'm talking about you asked the question of what's interesting about me. I really, really do find so much joy in living right here, right now. But it is solely contingent on my choice, not how others are perceiving me, how others are seeing the world, intentionally moving away from people who are viewing the world in a way that, frankly, I just don't want to show up that way. And in the chat, this has been an interesting exercise because I want to read through the chat to see questions like how we're talking now. Like there's been a couple really meaningful times where we've had good conversations in the chat and other times where it's like trolls. And so I can't derive any kind of meaning or worth, even joy from the chat. Like I need to maintain that emotional disconnect so that the good comments don't bother me, but also the bad comments don't either, because they can be really horrifying. I'm just looking here at some of the who I just saw you say life is rough. Eventually it wears you down and breaks you. If you'd be willing to share your story, I'll share mine, but I'd love to hear from you if you're willing. The choosing joy thing, that is a decision. And I actually have found folks who have chosen joy even on the other side of so much grief. Christopher, I just saw you say my girlfriend died. Oh my gosh, I can't see my kids. I just got out of prison and I'm struggling with heroin. I don't know what to do. I'm in the UK. Thank you so much for being here. One question I have for you, in one sense, it's like, what do you even say? Because it's just so devastating. It's like in times like this, that's where you want to be in person with people it's like just loving on each other. Our community doesn't do that. Western culture doesn't do a good job of coming around each other in grief. I went one time to a wedding that had more of Eastern roots, or I'm sorry, a funeral where they had more Eastern roots. And it was so beautiful how much they came alongside each other. And we don't have that. We don't have that in the Americas and Europe that I've experienced outside of something very cultural. It's like, man, we don't know how to sit alongside someone. There's actually a biblical narrative of this guy who loses everything, all of his kids, all of his wealth, everything. And then his friends are just sitting around basically saying, this is what you did wrong for your life to fall apart. And it was just like the exact example of what not to do. But there was this one friend, and it says he sat in the ashes with him. And I think that that's exactly what we're supposed to do. It's like when our life literally goes up in smoke and our future crashes, and it's just sitting in the ashes. And the sitting in the ashes is the very place where transformation comes. We think about the phoenix rising from the ashes. When the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, I didn't know this until recently. It literally dissolves. It completely dies. And so there is something about, are we willing to go through a rebirth and die? Christopher, you said one step at a time, I guess, but I just feel like a ghost. Oh, man, I'm so sorry. I cannot imagine. My sister lost her husband. He was 26 and she was 26, and they had a 3-week-old baby girl, and he was killed by a drunk driver. And it was just, it's like, it's like, how do you even talk about it? I don't know if you do this, actually. I wonder if you journal at all, because that was like the one place that I would go to for kind of my own respite, I guess you could say. Like, because I wasn't the one who lost my husband, I didn't feel permission to talk about it, which granted I could have, but yeah, I would be curious if you journal at all, or if that's helpful for you. Even just to be angry and let it out, like the point is that it needs to come out. I suppressed my grief over losing my brother-in-law for 6.5 years. And then when my husband left and my world fell apart, it was like I had all this suppressed, just so much grief, and then layering on this other level of grief with my husband leaving. I just, like, oh, it was so awful, because there was just like decades of pain there, and so it's all trapped in our body. And so whether it's writing out and releasing that way, whether it's honestly, and I know that there's, again, no training on grief, but I found this in a book. I wasn't told this or taught this, but effectively, we actually have to physically release through like crying or even shaking or whatever, because when you look at literally animals in the wild, the way that they calm down is literally by getting out everything that's pent up, everything that's trapped literally in their body. And the scientist, he tranquilized a polar bear who was running away from him. And when the polar bear woke up, he was like shaking violently in the cage. And then when they slowed down the video, his arms and legs were making running movements. He was like completing the chase. And then afterwards, his breathing returned to normal and he was fine. It's like these animals go through really traumatic life and death situations, and then they're fine. Their body literally gets to stasis because they let out the emotion. And so that's something I've learned that has really helped me. So writing has been huge. And then actually literally I'm crying, like letting out, whether it's crying or yelling or whatever, shaking even. I remember one time I thought the sink would break under me, because I just was like, you're heaving over the sink. But honestly, each one of those experiences is necessary for, it's almost even honoring the person who passed too. Because if it's trapped in our body, oh my gosh, this is so important. I don't know about you, Christopher, but I was afraid that if I healed, I would lose access to my brother-in-law, Nate. His name was Nate. And just like the most wonderful human, as I'm sure your girlfriend was, like just wonderful people. I forget what I was saying. I just saw your comment. You said my legs just move. I don't know. I feel like a ghost. Christopher, I hope this is okay. And I'm not going to do it now because I don't know. I don't want to, I don't know. I've never done this before. But I'm going to be praying for you. I've prayed live before just because I've wanted to, because it feels right in the moment. But But I am going to be praying for you because I can't imagine the pain that you're going through, and I'm so sorry. I just saw 𝐤𝐤𝐞𝐢 said, I just ended my 19-year relationship with my partner. Wow. She suffered from BPD. I think that's bipolar disorder, and it took all those years for it to finally end. I think God tests the people he loves the most. Wow. I have chills. Oof. That's the bipolar disorder is so. There's, again, guys, when I say there's no training for this, I actually really mean that. Like, we're taught from grade school onward how to read, how to do math, and we're not taught how to love and how to do relationships and how to grieve and how to let it out and how to engage with each other and how to live big and bold and be human. We're not taught how to be us. And then when someone dies or when we ourselves go through so much pain, we're completely at a loss. We have no idea what to do. We're not trained, we're not given the tools for this. And so, Christopher, I just want to honor you. Like, I really, and honestly, you too. I mean, I'm so grateful for you guys sharing. I think that a space like this is partially why we go live every day, is to talk about these things. How are we actually doing? Because for so long as it lives stuffed inside us, we're not going to be able to live fully, And so it's almost like on the other side of grief, I think maybe it's not even on the other side of grief. I think it's actually in the grief, in acknowledging the grief, we actually see how much we loved in the first place. And there's something really beautiful, like, we should really be proud of that, be proud of who we are, and be proud of how we love. That we have hearts that big to begin with, because a lot of people don't know love. And what a blessing to have experienced that love at any point. There's actually a quote. Let me see if I can find this with ease. I'm pulling up my book right now, so hopefully I don't crash everything. It's on pages and it is so big. I want to read to you a quote, Christopher, that I read after my brother-in-law was killed, and it was just so healing to hear. Actually, I'm going to read you two things. So this is by Nicholas Wolterstorff. Grief is existential testimony to the worth of the one loved. That worth abides, so I own my grief. I do not try to put it behind me, to get over it, to forget it. Every lament is a love song. So I hope that you can own your grief. Every lament is a love song, and every laugh is a love song too, because your girlfriend, my brother-in-law, even honestly, I would even say, I wonder if you would find that your partner would want this too when she's in her right mind. They would want us happy. Like, that's something that's actually really honoring those that are no longer with us, honoring their memory and honoring our love that we gave them, where we don't die with them, but we get to carry on their legacy and make it a part of ours at a really integral level. There's one other quote that I want to read. I can't remember what chapter it's from. And I want you to know, Christopher, this is a journal entry. So I include journal entries in my book. It's not coming out for a little bit, but I include this journal entry this is January 21, 2022. So this is a week after we signed divorce papers. I said, how do I process a shattered future? How do I dream or hope or fight for an outcome again? I gave everything and hoped and prayed so fervently. there's something on, again, on the other side, but also in the grief, that that's the allowance of being broken open. It's like we actually have to allow ourselves to be broken open. So feeling and moving through what is being reflected in the breaking process. Because if we're just almost like physically resisting the grief, we actually can't break open. And Valerie, I just saw you say fear nothing. There's something around, like, is there fear? This is interesting. I like, is there actually fear that could be resisting grief? You said, I believe losing loved ones, parents, and especially siblings is much harder later in life than when it happens at a younger age or during adolescence. It really takes a toll on you. I hadn't thought about it from that perspective of like losing them later, but that's such an interesting take. Honestly, it's like I'm close. Tell me if you mean it in this way, because this is how I interpret it. And I want to make sure that I fully understand. If I lost my dad today or 5-10 years from now, I'm just getting that much closer to him. Like, I actually am living my life very intentionally in relationship to my parents, because I feel the finiteness of their lives. It's like my dad and I were actually presenting together at like a lunch and learn, but it was a breakfast for a restoration company. We have a 100-year-old painting business in our family. And we were doing a lunch or a breakfast there the other day. And I was just like, man, I love this man so much. And so to think of losing him, it just is getting worse, the thought of losing him. So tell me if that's what you mean. Wow. Smith David, you said grief is the tax you pay for the loved one who dies. Wow. Grief is the tax you pay. I was talking with someone, I guess a year ago, and she made the choice to just shut down and not pay that tax. So there's two choices here, and Valerie, you said fear nothing. It's like, okay, what choice are we going to make? Because we have a choice, and you might choose to shut down and not live, and thus not love. So are we willing to pay the tax? Christopher, I thought what you said was so telling. Like, I'm angry she left me. My friend, his brother was killed. I don't remember how. I think it might have been a car accident or something. I don't remember, but his brother was killed. And he said, I'm angry at my brother for leaving. And this was in the confines of like we were doing a knowing retreat. So I host retreats where we'll like literally do this work together. And he didn't even know this, but he was like, I think I'm angry that he died. I'm angry at him. And y'all, there's these subconscious narratives that we don't even know are there, but we so often can hold anger towards the person who died. And so for so long as we've got this unresolved anger towards them, it's like we've got a foot in the grave, or 2 feet, or all of us, depending on how far we are down that rabbit hole. And there's so many different reasons why we might have that, but part of the concept of forgiveness isn't just forgiving them, it's also forgiving ourselves, because survivor's guilt is so real. And y'all, I found so much, I was talking earlier about some of the things that have been helpful for me. I said journaling, actually letting out the emotions so that they don't stay stuck in my body. Also asking questions of myself, asking why. We don't know. We have to get to the root to be able to pull it out. And Christopher, you said, I feel like a ghost. When I looked in the mirror for the first time when my husband left, I realized I had been living as a non-person, and I actually was living as a non-person, one, because I grew up in a very Christian conservative environment where it was like, serve everybody, everyone else is the goal, don't think about yourself. And so I was very focused that way. But also at the same time, I really did not cultivate who I was. And so I just was looking externally for everyone to tell me who to be. And so when I looked in the mirror and realized I was living as like a phantom, it was a big wake-up call of like, okay, well then how then do I live? Like this question of how then shall I live has been a question that I just keep at the forefront of my mind. How do I want to live my life? And that translates down into the daily, because otherwise, my brother-in-law's dad, he hasn't lived since then. Since his son was killed, it's like, what's the point? He has 3 other kids, you know? And oh man, are you worth living for? Are you worthy? And you know what? I just want to say for y'all listening, you are. And I know that that's a bold statement because I don't know you, but I believe because you're made in the image of the ultimate divine creator, that there is a purpose and a meaning and a call over your life in the most beautiful, profound way that brings healing, even just in choosing to believe that. Again, we have a choice. So are we going to choose to stay and remain cold and shut down and unhealed and suppressed, or even choose to stay in the grief, numb? Or are we going to choose the truth, and that requires going to the source of truth in order to become acquainted and familiar with what is true to begin with. I'm just, Smith David, you said the most painful scars are the ones you can't see. Isn't that the truth? My gosh. Jay Franklin, you said, it's never about me. It never has been. It's always about Jesus Christ. It always has been. I want to get to that in just a minute, Jay, because I actually, I want to ask you a question, but before I do, I just want to get to Smith David. You said the most painful scars are the ones you can't see, and you said losing my girlfriend to cancer just feels like an open wound that won't heal. Wow. I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. How long ago was that? To Rep, I see you said, I lost my best friend, my dog in August. It broke my soul. And you said, I lost my father when I was 20 years old. And my brothers were much younger. They seem to have a different kind of amnesia and don't remember it, but I remember everything. And it's so much harder for me. What an interesting point. I think you're absolutely right. It's like the deeper and closer we get. So like Christopher, you had 20 years, 20 precious years with your girlfriend. And it's like, it almost makes it worse, all those memories, and y'all, I'll say this. This is like sacred ground, Pain is holy. It has a holy component to it. When I was sitting at my former husband and I had my sister and her 3-week-old baby girl move in with us when my brother-in-law was killed, and the house, there was like almost like a palpableness around the grief. It was almost like you could taste it. It was so heavy and so painful. And in that process, I just also experienced, it was like the veil between heaven and earth seemed to lift. And I freaking contended with God. And I was like, how could you? How dare you? Who are you? You're clearly not who I thought you were. And in the veil lifting, there's so much access to the divine. Again, should we so choose to pursue him and direct the questions, direct the anger, I'm so grateful I will say this, I'm so grateful that right after my brother-in-law was killed, I actually took off some time and just was really home with my sister and her daughter. And I really contended with God. And I was like, what is faith? What does that even mean? What is hope? What does that even mean? Because we hear these words all the time, but what does that even mean? And when you actually dig into it, what am I actually saying I believe to begin with? Who is God? Just like asking these questions that I grew up believing my whole life. And I just needed to know him in such a different way, because knowing God when you're in grief versus knowing God when you're not in grief and never have experienced grief, it's a completely different type of experience. We got on here tonight saying, what are your experiences that are effectively qualifying you for life? There's an element when you've gone through this depth of pain, that experience actually qualifies you. There's this beautiful, beautiful concept. It says, with the same comfort we've received, we then comfort others. Because of the experience of pain, it is our qualification to then comfort. So long as I want to say that with a caveat, because actually some people who have gone through pain are actually worse because they chose stoicism, or they chose to harden themselves, or they chose to ignore, or they chose to remain stuck, But man, if we're able to actually experience and allow ourselves to be open to receive compassion from ourselves, from others, from God, that compassion, it's like, am I going to let myself feel? And Valerie, I'm so glad you brought up fear. And Smith, I just saw, wow, this is so interesting. You said, with the devil in my ear, the reaper in my hand, I just feel the need to make it all disappear. It's like, what are those things? Like those things that are coming in, and to your point, that are whispering in our minds. Again, back to this morning's A Course in Miracles lesson, there are no neutral thoughts. Is it giving life? Sometimes memories of our loved ones give life. And other times it's like, it literally sucks the life out of us. My sister wrote a blog. Man, chills all over. She wrote a blog post 3 years after her husband was killed, and it was titled, I Choose Hope, because it is a choice. Am I choosing to remain in the past? And it is so beautiful, but it's carrying those people with us, carrying them with us in our hearts rather than remaining in the grave with them. And I feel my brother-in-law, I really do. Like, I do not know. Don't take this and use it against me. I have no idea how heaven works, how afterlife works. I have no idea. And I have faith that somehow we'll all be together again. I really, really do. And I actually believe that, when I say the past them in the grave, I'm talking about the physical body. But if we have this, a willingness to consider that with God, there's no time, there's no space, there's no physical dimensions. And maybe these people that we really, really love are actually alive and thriving, and they're just in a different time zone, And truly, maybe this loss is actually a part of the story, and it can actually be a gain to bring that person with us as we continue to move forward, rather than keeping ourselves stuck back there. Because there is a choice that we can make to live a beautiful, wonderful life. And those periods of breaking, reckoning with brokenness, it was actually in those periods of pain where life was also most beautiful. When my little niece, she was 3 weeks old when her daddy was killed. And when she took her first step, when she had her first belly laugh, it was just like, the joy was so much more heightened because we were allowing ourselves to feel the weight of grief. So when we start allowing ourselves to feel emotions, other emotions become unlocked as well. And all of a sudden, life becomes vibrant and it becomes beautiful and incredibly painful still. So are we willing and brave enough to allow not just for the darkness to be felt, but also the light? And it is not betraying them to feel the light, because we take them with us. I'm just taking a look at some of these messages. Interesting. Jay Franklin, you said the devil can attack Father God, but the devil can attack us to get to Father God. I've never thought of that. That's so interesting. Or can't attack Father God. Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, I've never heard of that. But yes, that's so fascinating. It can attack us to get to Father God. That's real. I need to think on that. C. Martin Love says Revelation 21:4 describes a future time when God will eliminate tears, death, mourning, crying, and pain. I so believe that. I so believe that. Christopher, I became Christian for her through the church. I tattooed all my fingers and hands. Ugh. I hear whispers. I'm crying bad. I'm so sorry for everyone who lost loved ones. Me too. Me too. Y'all, it's like there's a community of us that exist, and we're here and we're out there. And, I haven't started this yet, but I want to start the knowing community at some point. And I think that what I'll do is actually have like a grief channel where if someone's having a hard time, when we're remembering, we can play stories there. We can share that we're struggling and we can just come alongside each other. Because I remember when my brother-in-law was killed, it was like I didn't want to talk to anyone who had not gone through grief and had not lost somebody, because I'm like, you don't understand. Like, we're just at a fundamental impasse. And here's another thing too that's really, really challenging is that other people close to us, my whole family lost my brother-in-law and we all reacted very different. So I'll just say that it's hard when everybody engages with grief different. C. Martin, you said, oh my gosh, I love this verse. Psalm 34, verse 18 says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. Christopher, I love that. You said, I have to be strong. I don't have a choice. Like, you know what? You're choosing to be strong. You actually do have a choice and you're choosing to be strong. And I applaud, like, literally, it's so brave. Theodore Roosevelt's quote he has a speech called Citizens in the Arena from 1912. And there's this section where he talks about the man in the arena. And it is one of the most powerful comments. And I guess comments, it was a speech, but it was just such an incredible speech because he's talking about each one of us is in our own arena. And other people are outside the arena pointing and sneering and criticizing us. And we are literally doing the best we can. And so I think it's actually really important for every single one of us who are moving through this time of suffering and grief. It's like, cheer yourself on, cheer yourself on. Actually give your brain, literally it's chemical, the dopamine hit of, I'm really proud of how I showed up for my kids today, even though I'm suffering. I'm really proud of the way that I'm choosing hope, or I'm choosing joy, or I'm choosing to be strong, because that power of choice. Viktor Frankl wrote the book, The Man's Search for Meaning, A Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read that, I actually really, really recommend it. It's so powerful. He talks about the fact that because he was in Auschwitz and his wife was put through the gas chamber and they killed her. And he has this moment where he talks about he learned love because of his wife, and that love he carried with him. And he's like, now I understand the angels who say they are perpetually lost in a state of glory. He's like, pain, when you're in that much pain, love has a way of transcending you out of it. So this is so incredible. And I don't think I've ever really put it. Wow. I wrote a whole chapter on this in my book, and even just talking about it with you now. Thank you so much for giving us all space to talk about this. Christopher, I think you started this. The thing that is more powerful than pain is love. And love actually pulls us up and it pulls us out. So to dwell on the love of the beloved, therein we're raised up and out of almost like the darkness of pain. Love sheds light. And in that process, we are lifted higher. Viktor Frankl also talks about the fact that they could steal everything from him, even his wife, his body, but they could not steal the greatest human freedom, which is choice. And so I just want to, yeah, Christopher, you said, how do I move on? I love her. I think that actually that's how you move on, is loving her well and continuing to honor her in the way that you show up every day. It's allowing love to raise you up from the place that you're currently in, from almost like the darkness, and allow for love to be the transforming fuel. And love, not just fixated on her, but on the divine, on your creator, acting in reaction to the image that you bear, and allowing for that to really power you forward, because you have a purpose. And you're honestly, this would be my charge to you. Obviously, if we were having a person to person conversation, I would be curious how many people actually really need your story and your experience and need to derive hope from you. And like you just starting to write about it. I started writing my journey of losing my husband while I was losing him. Like I wasn't on the other side of grief. My book Knowing, which is going to be coming out later this year, I wrote so much of it in the pain, because I hate when people are just like on the other side of it and they're like, oh, I'm the risen phoenix. And it's like, okay, it's easy for you to say, I'm still in the ashes. So I wanted to write from the place of ashes, because it just is like this great divide that we can't cross when we don't understand, or we feel like no one understands what it's like to be in the ashes. And so I would encourage you to write. And I would imagine that there's just so much for you there that literally could be life-changing generationally for your kids. They need to know her, and they need to know you. And so who are you going to be for them? It's allowing love for her, love for God, love for your children, and finally love for yourself. You're worthy of this life. You're worthy of living a full and rich life. And so is and was she. And I actually do believe she's living fully somewhere else. Like, I don't think she's just, I don't know. I don't know. And I don't think any of us know. But what are we going to choose? What are we going to choose? And so that's, at the end of the day, the question, what are we going to choose? So y'all, thank you so much for coming on here. And man, this has been probably my very favorite show ever. I think I've done 210 shows at this point. This is my favorite one. And I'm just so grateful for every single one of you. Thank you. Thank you for being so honest, so truthful. Christopher, you said, this is the first time I opened up. I write and play violin, but can't do anything just yet. I love how you said just yet. I think it's coming. I don't know how long it's been, but I really do. C. Martin, thank you for these beautiful verses. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Jess says, Auntie, it's past your bedtime. You should go to sleep. You're like 46. I will actually go to sleep, but I actually do want to do something. I do want to say a prayer for all of us, because whether we are in grief, we have been in grief, or honestly, we will know grief, everything we talked about tonight is really, really important. And I just really appreciate everybody here. And I think these are again, pain is sacred. It's holy, almost, getting to experience the love for that person at a visceral level, like coming to know pain viscerally. We thus know love viscerally. So I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to jump off and we can all go to sleep. God, I I don't even know where to start. There just aren't words when it comes to this gravity of pain. God, you said that you know all of our tears and that you've put them in a bottle. You've also said a bruised reed you're not going to break. And God, we're just all of us together, like virtually holding hands and just hugging on each other and saying we're bruised. And God, I pray for literally your angels to minister comfort. God, wherever Christopher is, Nicholas, Valerie, Brian, Ches, all the other names, Father, and the people being here, God, that I haven't listed, God, I just thank you. What a gift. God, what a gift that we can come together from all across the world and find respite and love and care and exactly what we need when we're hurting. God, this is just so much bigger than us. All of it, the pain, what happens after. And God, I just ask tonight for so much, just tenderness. God, I ask truly that everybody here would literally feel and embrace a hug from a father, from you, God. Father, I pray that this would just continue to move us closer to you, to each other, to love. God, that love would heal us, that love would lift us up. We would allow love to transcend us from the pain and the darkness. God, I pray that we would take control over choice, the choices that we make, the power that we have, the power to love, the power to take all the memories with us as we move forward into just tomorrow. It's just one day at a time. So, Father, I just ask that we would all come to know you in a really personal way that brings healing. God, I pray that we would contend with you and be brave to do that we would go into the arena with you and ask you the hard questions, pour out our soul, and release everything that we've been storing up. God, I pray that we wouldn't be afraid to move through the pain, to move through the emotions, to write it out, to chronicle it, to experience it. And God, that experience is our qualification. God, I thank you for every single person here. In Jesus' name, amen. Y'all, this has been so meaningful. Hua, I'm sorry I didn't say your name. Hua. I completely agree. We're so connected. It's really incredible. Y'all, thank you for coming on here tonight. I'm really, this has been so meaningful. So thank you. I'll talk to you soon, and sending so many hugs to all of you. Good night.